And from that innovation to implementation, now we are moving forward to another I, that is intelligence. And we are now going to talk about artificial intelligence. So we will have a very distinguished faculty today with us. We will discuss about smarter trials with artificial intelligence, in the role of artificial intelligence in clinical trials, how it could accelerate the discovery process, along with protect the trust issues. So we have with us Dr. Santosh Dixit, who is a chief domain expert, artificial intelligence consultant at Healthcare and Life Sciences Innovation Labs, Persistent Systems, Pune. So we are really grateful to have you with us, Dr. Dixit. Now this stage is yours.
Thank you, Dr. Shambhu. Can you confirm if you can see my screen as well as hear me well?
Yes, it is, but please make it full screen.
Yes. All right. So are we good to go?
Yes, please.
Okay. And the rain gods have blessed us in Pune. So I hope there are no disturbances. But what I'll try to do is, I'll try to save my bandwidth by going off camera. But during the question answers, I'll come back on camera just to gain some bandwidth. So is that okay?
Sure, sir.
Okay. Okay, so Dr. Shambhu and all the organizers, I see a lot of distinguished societies come together to celebrate the ICTD. As a clinical pharmacologist, this is something that we all look forward to year by year. And this time I'm happy to contribute to talk about a very important topic that is capturing everybody's imagination right now. How can we disrupt the current state of art when it comes to clinical trials with the help of AI? I'm a clinical pharmacologist. I'm not a practicing medico, but I come with a PhD in the field. And in the last 4 years, I have been dabbling into data sciences and artificial intelligence, keeping the clinical pharmacology passion intact. And there are some very interesting new areas that are happening. I'm going to tell you in the next 15 to 20 minutes as we go further. So before we actually go to my presentation, I wanted to take a review of where the field stands today. What are the headwinds and tailwinds when it comes to current day clinical trials, right? So if you look at the top, there is tremendous increase in the study pipeline. New targets are getting created, new models, new ways of doing clinical trials. Protocols are becoming complex. There is new technology being adopted. There are new designs. There are diversity and inclusion initiatives. And so this is a very dynamic field right now. And then to meet those new changes, there are certain knowledge gaps that are appearing. For example, there are disrupted workflows. There is a need for a lot of human resource that can look at these kind of areas. And then more importantly, from a study sponsor and site point of view, all stakeholders are feeling the heat right now that you are not able to meet the requirements. There are tremendous challenges. There are budgetary challenges. There are data challenges. There are human resource challenges, etc. Right? So the CRO field is always very interesting. We know that there are more problems than solutions in this field. And this being such an important part of the overall drug discovery development continuum, this is one area that we all need to constantly look at, right? And another big tailwind that is happening is the strategic adoption of AI, despite the challenges that I just mentioned. So there is a mad push right now, and I'm using this word very carefully. There is you can call it almost like a hype cycle right now, where AI seems to be like a panacea for every problem that any enterprise is facing right now. But let us try to be objective here, and let us try to see how AI is really going to be integral to the modern day clinical trial landscape. So in any CRO, we are all part of the CRO ecosystem. When you think of a CRO strategy or an AI strategy, there are about 5 tenets that one needs to constantly be aware of. Right? First of all, is there an overarching strategy? Are you really looking at doing AI for the sake of AI, or is there any strategic investment Do you have internal capabilities on handling this kind of a strategy? Very important. Much before the strategy is also important that do you have a very good, robust data foundation? Because data, as you can imagine, is the jugular vein of any AI. The only good quality data will give you good quality AI. So do you have the necessary attributes to say that you have good quality data infrastructure? Secondly, do you have the technology layer that can deliver the AI that you are looking for? Now, AI is an often misused term. There are multiple nuances to AI. There is generative AI, there is predictive AI, there is machine learning, there is deep learning. Which AI platform are you going to use, right? It cannot be just one size fits all. So you need to understand that aspect. Most importantly, do you have the teams that can implement and adopt constantly according to the need of the hour, right? So this is where a lot of emphasis on skilled human personnel comes into picture. And in order to keep them constantly sharp and ready with business, you need to undertake continuous learning and innovation, right? So any modern enterprise, whether you are a hospital industry, whether you are a provider, or even a CRO industry, these are typically the thought processes that are all pervading right now in the field of AI. And my own organization, Persistent Systems, is not averse to that kind of a thinking. So what we are doing is, we are taking this conveyor belt approach to the life cycle of a clinical trial. We are all familiar with these three phases of a clinical trial. There is a startup phase, there is an implementation phase, and then there is a closeout phase, right? So if I can break down this entire activity into different silos, but when I mean silos, they are interrelated silos. For each of these boxes, you can see that AI can improvise and improve the efficiency of that entire process, right? And this has been documented very well. There are large volumes of evidence now that tell you that each of these processes can be simplified. You can bring time to advantage, you can bring a cost advantage, accuracy advantage as part of the entire process, right? So the current industry, the current CRO industry is completely possessed by application of AI in all of these technologies. But the real question is, where is the bang for the buck, right? Where is the tremendous impact where you want to invest your resources? So where we think there is a tremendous impact are four major areas. One is the trial intelligence. And when I say trial intelligence, it is the design of the trial. The next part is basically the entire life cycle of trial management, where we look at various phases of the trial and what we can do as part of those activities that I described in the previous slide. And more importantly, you see more and more traction in the regulatory submission part, right? We know how important those four aspects are. What me and my group at Persistent we are doing is we are innovating in this space, and we are creating some solutions that can expedite these processes that we just talked about, right? So for example, if it takes X number of hours to do the conventional way of a job in a clinical trial, can you do it maybe X divided by 2 or X divided by 3? So that is the thought process. We are trying to bring in time and cost advantage by creating these solutions. Because I have limited time, I'm only going to take few use cases today, the one that are in the green. And I'm going to try to convince to you that this is probably one way to look at improvising on the clinical trial scenario. So let's take one by one. My first use case is what is called as creating smart clinical trials for patient cohort identification. This is especially true in today's world where we are looking at a lot of biomarkers. These biomarkers could be precision biomarkers coming from genomics, from proteomics, even your conventional biochemistry or imaging biomarkers. And everybody knows the need for stratification of patients. One size fits all doesn't really cut it anymore. At the same time, you need to really be wise about how to select patients. So how can you improvise your current protocols to bring in AI for improvised patient cohort identification, right? So that is a big challenge. And why this is a challenge? Because we know that wrong selection of patients is one of the single most reasons why clinical trial fails. And it also bleeds the trial in terms of the finances and the outcomes and so on and so forth. So our intention here is to try to simplify this process. And we have created what is called as smart clinical trials. If there is any interest, maybe I can show this demo to you subsequently, but right now I'm just going to show a slide where in this demo, what we do is, let me walk you through the diagram. So the intention here is that when you have a clinical trial protocol document, which is approved by the IRB, you will take the eligibility criteria the eligibility criteria will be parsed. You will look for specific biomarkers, etc. And then it will undergo some kind of digital transformation. These are called as SQL queries. I will not go into technical jargon. But this SQL query is like a vector that can talk to the patient data, which is in the form of your provider side repository. And by doing some kind of cross-matching between the keywords and the keywords in the electronic medical records, you can rank order the patients that belong to the respective category that you are looking for, right? So if you follow step number 1, 2, 3, and 4, I do key entity extraction, I do model generation, then I match with the patient, and then I rank order. And this rank order of patients can be made available to any user in the form of a dashboard, where I can look for out of the 1,846 patients, maybe 680 patients, they match to the particular criteria that I'm looking for. Right? So with the help of AI, all of a sudden, a large pool of my randomized cohorts can be then simplified in order to make it extremely collimated for the specific biomarkers that I'm looking for. And this is now getting implemented in a lot of CROs. Many CROs have these kind of services that can be implemented as part of their utilities for providers and a lot of hospitals together. The idea here is that you still need human in the loop. You are not going to obviate the CRC or the principal investigator, but these are enablers. By creating these tools, you can simplify the process of cohort selection. You will still need the conventional way of interviewing the patient, of going through their physical examination, doing due diligence, etc. But the ability to filter off these patients from your large pool of patients significantly saves time and at the same time cost advantage also, right? So this is one way that the industry is looking at creating smart clinical trials. Another very big area that we are seeing tremendous impact is the ability of AI to help in medical writing. And we all know the importance of regulatory submissions, documentation, due diligence, when it comes to CTD documents, etc. Now, everybody here, I believe, knows about CTD triangle. There are various modules. These are ICH compatible modules. Each module is standardized. It is templatized. There is a lot of harmonization in the way the modules have to be documented so that you can have harmonization across regulatory agencies and etc. But we all know how cumbersome this process is, right? This can really be like a huge mountain load of manual work that is required during that entire process. But can you automate this whole process, right? So that is the challenge here. And what is the challenge? You want to have human in the loop who will have control over the first draft of the document. That is the biggest challenge. You don't want a machine to develop this document by itself, because then it will be exposed to a lot of errors coming from the system. You always want human into the system that can look at it. At the same time, you want traceability. You want primary references to where that data has come from. You want to have authentication. You want to have editing capabilities, etc. Right? So these are the typical requirements of AI-guided medical writing. And what we have done is, using these principles, we have created our own solution. Broadly, in that solution, what happens? There are 7 steps in the solution. On my screen, you will first see that these are the documents that I want to select. For example, I could select a CSR, I would select an analytical procedure document or a clinical trial protocol draft. And then I will have the templatized document coming from the ICH, the CTD repository. And this is where the magic of AI starts coming in. So we can intake now data coming from the raw sources, which are the proprietary property of the client. These are data repositories under protection. And then from here, you can only extract the key entities that are relevant for your regulatory submission. You can avoid signal to noise ratio here. And then that can be auto-populated with the help of AI into these templates. So this is done by a principle called as NLP, natural language processing. And you can actually create a templatized document. More importantly, the human comes into the system where the human expert can edit, update, delete, and look at the next draft of document. And then we have also created something called as evaluation criteria to determine what is the quality of this draft, right? And I'll come back to that in a minute. And then if your quality is satisfactory, then the final human user can approve the document, lock it with a signature, and then send further into the regulatory submission pathway, right? So this is how most of the industries are now doing regulatory submission documentation. What is very critical here is, how do you determine the quality of the generated document? And there are some routine checks. These are standard industry practices that have come in. So for example, are you adhering to the standards of writing? For example, if you're writing for EMEA, are you following those patterns? then your general English syntax or your language syntax, accuracy against the literature. So can you cite the primary references? Very important. And then can you do vocabulary terminology matching? You can do ICD code matching. You can do a lot of these kind of activities. And each one of these can be rated with the help of aggregate scores. And let's say you can benchmark that any score which is 80% and above, therefore is an acceptable document, right? So this is the way you look at quality control into the overall system. For lack of time, I'm going to move into the third slide. And this is a very interesting story. In the new era of adaptive clinical trials, we are looking at new age designs. And there is this big push for replacing your conventional control arm with the synthetic control arm. And the advantages are many. You can have completely look at rare diseases. You can have a lot of data coming from just statistical comparison. You can completely get rid of placebo controls, etc. So many advantages of synthetic control arms. But US FDA or any regulatory agency is asking that the control arm has to be created according to certain standards. And these standards are called as fit for purpose standards, FFP standards. And therefore, the requirement is if you are going to create a synthetic control arm, how do you determine that the quality of that control arm is according to the standards set by the FDA? And this is where there is tremendous impact of AI. You can actually generate synthetic data with the help of AI with a technique called GNN. These are generative neural networks, which can actually create a centralized data according to your Poisson distribution of the original data from where it comes from. I will not go into detail, but this is a very advanced mathematical algorithm. But this works very well. You can create a synthetic control arm. So what we have done is we have taken one of the most complex scenarios of creating synthetic data for medical images. So let's say you are doing a cancer imaging trial with radiology. You can see tremendous impact of radiology and AI. So we have taken this use case. And for some reason, you are not able to meet your recruitment standard. So instead of 100 patients, you were able to only recruit 75 patients. But you still have that shortfall of 25 patients. And for them, we can generate a synthetic control arm with the help of this synthetic data created by the GNN activity. And by doing that, if this data matches to your original parent pattern, according to the statistical distribution, FDA will accept this synthetic control arm, and then you can do comparative studies between your control arm versus your treatment arm together, right? So this is the state of art when it comes to synthetic data generation. Doing synthetic data for numerical or textual is, in fact, an easy challenge. Medical imaging is where there is tremendous need for doing this kind of innovation right now. So this is all pervading right now. You can see tremendous impact in the entire value chain of clinical trials right now. What is the mantra in today's world, right? So the mantra is as follows. Put a lot of premium on your quality of data. So try to get as close as possible to fit for purpose data. So everybody is currently investing in upgrading their data infrastructure, data quality. Secondly, be very smart about using AI because AI can also be a money bleeder. So be very judicious, be very cautious about which AI you want to use where. Most importantly, bring in responsible AI because this entire activity is only as good as the trustworthiness, the explainability, and the intricacies of the AI that you will bring together. And this together will give you actionable insights. I have just cited a few examples where you see tremendous impact of biomedical applications, what we call as actionable insights that are getting tremendously overall because of AI impact. So the entire value chain of a clinical trial, which I described earlier, and then so many functional use cases, you can see now coming under the ambit of AI and clinical trials. And this is only probably this is going to snowball on us, right? So we are not going to run away from this particular activity. But a word of caution, because Dr. Shambho told me to talk about trustworthiness. There are inherent loopholes into the system. And because of these systems, there are risks associated with this whole activity. So what are the risks? One is the data that you are going to use has to be absolutely sacrosanct data. There cannot be patient identifiers. We know the ethics of PHI sensitive data. Therefore, you need to bring in a lot of data privacy security. Many of these models have inherent bias, and that bias can continue as part of your AI. So you want to minimize the bias. Wherever possible, you want to have consent. You want to bring transparency. You don't want to bring over-reliance on AI. You still want human to be in control. And even 10 years from today, this principle will remain. And then you want a lot of documentation. You want transparency, explainability, etc. And until you have external oversight, you want internal oversight also, right? To mitigate all these things. So there is a tremendous investment right now happening in responsible AI to identify the risks of these kind of activities and then how to mitigate and control these risks together. So for each of these activities, there are solutions available. You can bring in a lot of good data practices. You can bring fair principles. You can bring enhance due diligence into that entire process. And US FDA, GDPR, European Union, Government of India, almost every regulatory authority is coming up with their own local regulations. So we need to be compliant about all this. And above all, external regulations will not suffice. The humans that are involved in this enterprise have to be more and more diligent. So these are called the tenets of responsible AI. I am going to end with this slide. So this is a top-down, bottom-up approach. The last person in the value chain has to be responsible. The principal investigator has to be responsible. So that means you have to have organizational principles. You have to have constant training. You have to have robust data systems. You have to have frameworks. You have to have reporting standards. You have to have some kind of corrective mechanisms when there is an oversight or a breach. So these are principles that now enterprises are adopting, whether you are a provider or a CRO or a pharma company, because unless you adhere to any of these principles or all of these principles, you are going to stonewall yourself when it comes to regulatory submissions and realizing the true potential of AI in clinical trials. I'm going to end here. I'm very happy to take some questions as part of this equation, and I'm very thankful to the organizers for inviting me here.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dixit, for this wonderful deliberation, I must say. And I think the last slide, which is very important for all of us, and one question that had been asked by one of our delegates, that is, what are the models which can be generated by AI? So is it possible to, again, if you just focus on that particular slide, and also if you want to answer it?
Yes, absolutely. So I think this is a generic question. What kind of models can be generated? So let us understand the classification of AI. The conventional model of AI is where you take a learning data set and then you blind that data set, you develop a model, and then you expose a blinded data set to that model where it will give you some kind of prediction. So this is called as predictive AI. But the modern way of doing AI is something called as generative AI. So for example, somebody has already created these models for you. You must have heard of large language models and then large multimodal models. So there is no one rule of thumb here. It depends on the kind of question that you are solving for. In today's world, there is a more impetus on using generative AI. That means pre-baked models. A lot of open source data is available. If you have heard of Google, Microsoft, each one of them are creating healthcare specific models because there is large amount of data available from hospitals. The only downfall of those models is that there is an inherent bias and they hallucinate. So if you can manage the hallucination by bringing some kind of checks and balances, I think you can work with the AI. But if you are looking for 100% accuracy in a predictive model, for example, you are developing a medical device. My previous speaker talked about diagnostic devices. In that, you cannot use generative AI. There, you want to use absolute diagnosis. And therefore, you would rather use machine learning or your predictive AI in that kind of a situation. So it's a double-edged sword. AI model selection depends on the objective of the enterprise work that you are going to do.
Yeah, thank you, sir. One question just came into my mind, that sometimes we encounter patients with overlapping comorbidities and sometimes with incomplete records. So if we can use certain artificial intelligence enabled clinical trial platforms, because we are now talking about pragmatic clinical trials, real world evidence studies, so which could identify certain real world eligible patients more accurately, while also that could ensure the transparency. So how artificial intelligence models make those decisions, if that is available, or what is your take on this?
So let's take let's say you are running a hypothetical clinical trial with 500 patients, and you are only able to determine a cohort of 300 patients despite the time limit. And within those 300 patients also, there are a lot of missing gaps in the data, right? So, and this is reality of any clinical trial. So in this situation, you can do something called as synthetic data augmentation. I just referred to it. And if that synthetic data augmentation is done according to the regulatory standards, I think that is well acceptable. You can clean up your data and then try to make it compatible. So there is a term called AI readiness of data. So that AI readiness can be brought in with the help of synthetic data and AI models. That's one. Secondly, almost every clinical trial platform, electronic healthcare record now is AI enabled, whether it is Epic or whether it is a Red Hat or anything. So in that process, what happens is these AI can also determine where are the gaps, and it can propose the gaps that need to be overcome for doing this kind of analysis coming together, right? So the entire industry of electronic healthcare record is also undergoing a lot of disruption because of the adoption of AI. But ultimately, I think the tremendous impact of AI is data analytics downstream, not so much in the operations. So for example, let's take the oncology clinical trials, right? So if in a conventional way, your Kaplan-Meier curve only has let's say a 40% separation between the two curves, the survival curves of the two cohorts. But if AI can tease it further and it can show you that the true effect is not 40%, but maybe 70%. Just imagine the impact that will have on the marketability of that trial or the overall business impact of these kind of activities. So one of the biggest impact that is happening in data analysis is called multimodal data analysis. What does it mean? You can bring in images, you can bring genomics, you can bring every kind of modality of the data, and you can harmonize that data. And that harmonization is closer to the biological truth or the clinical truth. And by multimodal data analysis, you can actually get into the nuances of primary and secondary objectives. And I think that is where you are seeing tremendous impact on the clinical trial outcomes because of AI.
Yeah. So thank you. Thank you very much. I think we'll search for more questions if it is there. If it is not, so we are really thankful to Dr. Santosh Dixit for this thoughtful and very comprehensive lecture on how we can make our clinical trials smarter by using artificial intelligence. Thank you, Dr. Dixit, for your wonderful deliberation. And if you want to make any one take-home message for all of our delegates, it can make.
Okay, my message is, in the search of artificial intelligence, let not lose natural intelligence.
Yeah, so human intelligence is very important. Yes. I think that is the more important statement. So thank you once again, Dr. Dixit, for your beautiful lecture.